Several months ago, prompted by the Spirit of God, we as leadership felt led to take a journey through 1st and 2nd Samuel. That's not a cliche statement, that is the truth. So I trust that you will be walking with us in 1st and 2nd Samuel. 1st and 2nd Samuel contain the stories, the accounts, the narratives of 4 heroes. And we have looked at the first hero, Hannah. We described her in the beginning as an unlikely hero. Well, really, her son was the unlikely hero. She was the overlooked hero. From her life came influence and change that literally changed the world of Israel. Got rid of the evil empire and began a charismatic ministry through all the nation of Israel. This morning we look at her son, Samuel, in the beginning of his journey. He is the unlikely hero, a little boy in a situation of abomination and debauchery, fancy words, which means it doesn't get any more disgusting or as perverse as it was. And this little boy was God's answer to what was plaguing his people. God does indeed work in mysterious ways that we will never understand. Samuel was his answer. So we're going to look at this beginning journey of Samuel. The narrative that we're going to focus on this morning is found in 1 Samuel chapter 3. It is a narrative that I have called Here I Am. For here I am are the famous words uttered in 1 Samuel 3. But to set the table, let us remember that this is Samuel's beginning point. These are his first words in Scripture. This is us taking a glimpse at his young life and how he set in place the foundation for where he was going. But Samuel is only Samuel because his mother Hannah did something that the great men of God could not do. And we'd be amiss this morning, if we don't realize that. Samuel is who he was and became who he was and was a great man of God because of his mother. Gideon, one of the greatest judges of Israel, his sons did not share his faith. Eli, who we spoke of last week, his sons did not share his faith. Even this amazing Samuel, whose story is off the charts, his sons don't share the faith later on. And David, the final hero of our passages that we will look at, his sons don't share the faith. But it is the son of Hannah that is so influenced by his mother that he walks in the faithfulness of God his entire life. So let me say this to you. Mom, Dad, it is never too late to become an influence in your child's life, to change them for the glory of God. Did you hear what the Spirit said to this church? It is never too late as a mom or a dad to have an influence on your child that changes their life for the glory of God. But my kids are gone. First of all, they never really leave. And secondly, your influence never ends. And our enemy would want to tell you this: you are a failure, you failed at it, you had your chance, and it's done. That is a lie from the pit of hell. There is enough power here in each one of you to change the lives of your children and to influence them as Hannah did Samuel. Hannah did something that the bigwigs couldn't do or didn't do. And it started with her broken heart being poured out before God. That is where you begin. And you will change the lives of your sons and your daughters. It is biblical. So we look this morning at this life of Samuel. Samuel's story in chapter 3 is wedged between two horrific accounts. It's wedged in chapter 2, we're told the evil of the priests and their ways of fornication and their ways of blasphemy and their ways of brutality. And then on the other side of chapter 3, in chapter 4, we are told how Israel lost everything. The ark of God was taken by the enemy, and the worst thing possibly that could happen did happen. Evil in chapter 2, horrific evil in chapter 4, and in the middle, a story of a child. And that's how God does it. He sends answers before we even know we have problems. Did you hear what I said? This is not negative here. You're going to have some problems this week, next week, and in a few years to come. God's already sent the answer. He is not caught off guard. Samuel was sent before the ark was lost. Samuel was sent to take Israel back before Israel wandered completely away. God has already put in the process. He has already sent the answer before we even know we have a problem. And so we look at this beginning in chapter 3 of Samuel's life. You know what the people were expecting in chapter 3? Our main characters, what they were expecting in chapter 3, what their hearts were set on in chapter 3. It is something that some of you know. They were expecting to have a good sleep in church. They were. Our narrative is set in the tent of the meeting, the church of that day, where the Ark of the Covenant was, where the priest was. And it's set at nighttime. And people were expecting to have a good sleep. You know, the Bible says much to the church today, to you and I, telling us that we have to wake up, put off the days of slumber, put off the days of our drowsiness, and wake up, it says, sleeper. Today is the day of our salvation. Wake up. Years ago, my wife and I were going to visit some very good friends in Port Colborne. I think that's where they were, or Coburg, rather. We were driving there, and I drifted off to sleep, opened my eyes, and looked at my wife to the right of me. She was sleeping. She was so beautiful. I thought, my goodness, she is so pretty, even when she sleeps. And that's not because she was being quiet. That's just, she was beautiful. Oh, you are gorgeous. I should wake her up. Oh, I'm going to have a... And I went, she's to my right. Who is to my left? Oncoming traffic is to my left. I am the driver. We took the first exit to Tim Hortons and had a coffee. That's not our answer today, people. Wake up and take the first entrance into the Spirit of God, because now is the time that we need to wake up. Amen. And the enemy will put you to sleep if we don't wake up. So our narrative begins with Samuel in the tent of the meeting. And in chapter 3, it tells us that Eli is out sleeping in one room. He's in his mid-90s. And Samuel is sleeping in another room closer to the Ark of the Covenant. And it says, at this time of our narrative, at this time of the night, the lamp of the Lord had not yet gone out. In Exodus chapter 27, verses 1 to 2, it tells how Israel was supposed to keep the lamp lit by the Ark of the Covenant in the tent of meeting all night long until morning. And so it says in our narrative that this lamp had not yet gone out. So it's the early hours of the morning that our narrative begins. And the narrative tells us that Samuel was there ministering to God under the leadership of Eli. He was there probably to keep the lamp lit, to keep the light on. And he was there should Eli, the high priest, need him in the night. How many times would a person in their 90s call for help? If it as often as me, a lot. And Samuel was there where the lamp of the Lord was. And it says of that day that the word of the Lord was rare. The Hebrew word actually means precious. Rare is good. The word of the Lord was so precious, but it was not often found or experienced. There was a dearth, a gap. There was a silence of God speaking. We're not told why. We assume displeasure, but that's probably a false assumption. And Samuel was sleeping beside the Ark of the Covenant in another room. Samuel inadvertently was near where God had been. When God is silent, we need to stay where his revelation is. Samuel was there. And it says this, he was, as I have said, he was ministering to the Lord. And then it gives these words that are famous. But at this time, Samuel did not know the Lord. Actually, there's a word added to that description of Samuel. It says, at this time, Samuel did not know the Lord yet. I love that little word, yet. Because God was not done yet. Will you look at me here? You have a yet. God is not done yet. But riddle me this. And that's from Adam West and Batman from the 60s. Riddle me this. If Ryan was here, I'd say that was a relevant hipster idiom. Riddle me this. He was ministering to the Lord, but he did not yet know the Lord. Ipso facto, we can be dedicated to God. We can be ministering to God. We can be under the leadership of people who know God, but we might not know God. At this time, Samuel did not yet know God. I want to say this, one of my greatest fears. Well, you're not supposed to have fear, Pastor. You're supposed to have... Shut up. One of my greatest fears is not that you're going to come to me afterwards and say, I said shut up in church. I will apologize vigorously. One of my greatest fears is this. You could be sitting in this place today and for the last 20 years, and you could be in Samuel's situation where you did not know the Lord. You knew what it was to come to church. You occasionally knew what it was to hear a good sermon. That was supposed to be funny, but none of you went there at all. You'd be expecting a good sleep, but you might not yet know the Lord. Some of the scariest verses in the New Testament, Matthew chapter 7. Jesus said, "Depart from me, for I never knew you." And the people respond to him, "But we did miracles in your name, and we did this in your name, we did this in his name." And Jesus said, "But I never knew you." It never was personal. It was never intimate. It was never a relationship. It was just stuff on the periphery, but it was never you and me. Never. So ease my fear, would you please? And would you realize it's supposed to go from gathering and ministering to knowing him? Now I'm going to give you a word in the Hebrew that can be misconstrued. The word to know him is yada. And it's the same word that's used to describe sexual relations between men and women. It is not suggesting some type of perverse relationship with God. But it's taking that word and saying, you must have this intimate connection, this sharing of your life with God. This is what it is. It is to hear Him. It is to be connected to Him. It is to be transparent to Him. It is more than a gathering and ministering. It is to know Him. And at this time, Samuel did not yet know the Lord. But our narrative tells us that God was going to do something about that. And so as Samuel lay sleeping, waking up to keep the lamp lit, perhaps as Eli snored in the outer chamber, God was on the move. You know God is moving when you're sleeping? He neither slumbers nor sleeps, Psalm 121 says. And God was on the move. And as you know the narrative well, God comes to Samuel. Samuel hears a voice, and he hears, Samuel! And it says in the narrative that Samuel gets up and he runs to Eli. He runs to him as fast as his little legs could take him. Josephus, Joe, a noted historian, said that Samuel was, he thinks, 11 or 12 at this time. How did Josephus get to that? 11 or 12. He's a young boy. And he runs into Eli's room. And he says to Eli, here I am. You called me. You know, there's irony in that statement, here I am. Because not only does Samuel say it, but God says it, here I am. He says it to us all the time. Here I am, here I am, here I am. And Samuel runs in and he wakes up the slumbering Eli. I was going to pick one of you today. Some of you haven't drifted off yet. One time in Restool, where Ryan's preaching today, a man drifted off in our sanctuary. So I left the platform and just sat beside him and preached from there. Don't wake him up, he's having a good sleep. Samuel runs into Eli. And I'm looking forward to the 4K broadcast in heaven. By then it'll be Infinity K broadcast, probably. I want to see this narrative. As Samuel says to maybe a tossing and turning Eli, mid-90s, getting 12 minutes of sleep in a row, that's pretty cool. I remember sleeping before I got cramps. That was awesome. It's not stomach cramps, foot cramps. Wakes him up. You called me. Eli says, I did not call you. Go back to bed. I wonder what that sounded like. Did it sound like Greg Lublenkoff in the house? I didn't call you, go to bed. Did it sound like Dana in the house? I didn't call you, go back to take bed. What did he sound like when he was woken up from that sleep? What will this church sound like when we're woken up from our sleep? It'll be extravagant praise and worship, and the power of God will be abundant, and it's happening because we are waking up. Samuel goes back to his bed, and we're not told what he's thinking. But I've had some experience with 12-year-old sons and daughters. You called me, old man. I know you called me. And he goes back to sleep. And then God calls him again. Samuel. Samuel gets up. The first narrative says he ran to Eli. The second narrative doesn't say he runs. I love that part. Might just be a change of words. I don't know. First time he's running his little chubby legs off. The second time it's like, yep. Maybe. You called me. Here I am. Eli says, he adds a different refrain. He says, I didn't call you, my son. go back to bed. Is he being tender, or is he controlling himself? I didn't call you, my son. Go back to bed. So Samuel goes back to bed. And God calls Samuel a third time. I should wait to get to the fourth time, but do you see what's happening here? God is put on hold. God is not being answered. And God keeps on calling. And then he steps it up. My children say to me, just a minute, Dad, I'm going to put you on hold. I got another call. I say, no problem. I hang up every time. Every single time. Just a minute, Dad, I got another call coming in. Good, click. What happened? I don't know. My thumb hit a button and the phone went dead. I'm not sure what took place. God is not being responded to, and God keeps coming. And what does God do? He picks up his game to get louder and larger. That's what God does. He calls a third time. And Samuel goes back to Eli and says, you called me. Here I am. And it says Eli has an insight. The sleeping priest can still remember what it's about. But the tragedy is he doesn't do anything. The sleeping priest says he discerned, and he said to Samuel, God might be calling you. This could be a God thing, Samuel. Go back. And if he calls you again, say, here am I, your servant, I'm listening. Go back, Samuel. You know the tragedy that I see there? Powerful words. Powerful words. Life-changing words. You know what the tragedy is? Eli went back to sleep. That's the tragedy. He is the high priest, and God, who has not spoken, has not been heard, is speaking, so he thinks. And what does he do? He goes back to sleep. Does he not fall on his face? Does he not run in with Samuel? Does he not? He does nothing. He just goes back to sleep. Samuel goes back to where he was, and he lies down, and the narrative changes. The narrative gives an amazing detail. It says, God came and stood in the room and called Samuel's name twice. God didn't come into the room before, he just called Samuel. And now the narrative emphasizes God came on the fourth time, came into the room where Samuel was and called his name twice. Samuel, Samuel. The repetition is emphasis, the repetition is connection, the repetition is desire. But God did not want to be a distant voice. He wanted to be up front and present with Samuel, a boy. God came and stood there and talked to Samuel. What are you expecting this morning? God to show up? I hope so. But hear the word of Samuel. When he heard his name called the second time, I'm going to hear my name soon enough called by God. And then he's going to give me a new name. And then because of who Jesus Christ is, he's going to say to me, well done, my good and faithful servant, enter into your rest. I'm going to hear that soon. And if I go down, do not bring me back. Because you think I'm obnoxious now, I'll be more so then. Samuel says to God, here I am, your servant, and I am listening. Some of us cannot say that. Here I am is to offer ourselves. Your servant means here's our track record. This is what we're doing. And I'm listening. May I ask you, and I'm not being trite nor stuck for material or going to flannel graph message, what are you listening to? And what are you trying to hear? The other day, we needed to see our son, not because there was a problem, but because he's my son and I needed to see him. And Michelle, his wife, and our two grandkids, Noah and Aleda. We went and saw them, and we were in an arena. I think it was yesterday morning, I'm not sure. In Waterloo, I think. I'd been in that arena before it was that arena at 5 o'clock in the morning with my daughter. And now I was there at 11 o'clock in the morning with my son's children. And I thought, why couldn't I be there at 11 o'clock in the morning 30 years ago? But I was there and I was talking to my grandson Noah. They're coming up for March break. Noah and Aleda. I said, when's March break? Don't know. I said to my daughter-in-law, Michelle, when's March break? She says, in March. She's well on her way to be a helpful wife. Oh, good, good. And so there is a hectic hubbub going on in this foyer as people are putting skates on and getting ready to go out there on the ice. I mean, there's pandemonium, controlled pandemonium everywhere, happy sounds, coffee drinking sounds, no background noise. I think there's even music being pumped in. And so I'm looking at Noah, and he's about as close as that lamp on the table is, and I'm saying, hey, Noah, you coming to our house for March break? Yeah. I mean, we're going to have fun, right? Yeah. Well, you know what we're going to do? No. I said, we're going to go tobogganing. All right, on. We're going to have pizza day. Oh, yeah. We're going to have pajama day. Yeah. We're going to build Lego. Yeah. And I said, and we're going to watch, we're going to play Grand Theft Auto. That's a very bad game. You better not know that game. That is a very bad game. We're going to play Grand Theft Auto. All this noise going on. And out of the noise came my daughter-in-law's voice. You are not playing that game. You're not even part of the conversation. You're over there. And she picks up this thing. She hears me say that to him. She's not paying any attention. She's enjoying the fact that I'm not bothering her. She's distant. And she still hears what I'm saying to her son. We're going to play Grand Theft Auto. No, you're not. Her ears are tuned to what needs to be heard. And she hears it. I am amazing how my wife can hear things that were not intended for her to hear. I'm home. She's really good at that now. But I'll be in the back room and I'll whisper something. Tell me to take my boots off. And she'll say, take those boots off. How did you hear that? Because she's listening. I saw this, I read of this being done. Streets of New York, pandemonium everywhere. Noises and smells and a cacophony of sounds. Sociologists doing a study took a bunch of coins and dropped them on the sidewalk amongst the blare and the honks and the screams and the shouts and the pleasantries being shared. And when those coins hit the sidewalk, everybody stopped and looked to see where they were because they knew that sound. My wife worked in the bank for years. We used to play a game with her. We'd take a coin, drop it on the table, and she'd say, quarter, nickel, nickel, penny, penny. Because she was attuned to that sound. What are you listening for? Have you come to the place where you actually think that God, who walks into the little boy's room, Samuel, and stands there and calls to him, he's not calling you? Have you come to that place? Because that's exactly what Satan wants from you. To think that he is not talking to you. The last thing that Revelation records as a message to the church is, he who has ears to hear, let him hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. Ecclesiastes says these words, come to the sanctuary, don't offer the sacrifice of fools, but come to listen and to hear. God said to Peter, Listen to him. He's my beloved Son. May I say something to you this morning? God is speaking to you. He's trying to invade your space. And you have to say, I am here, and I want to listen. This is how Samuel started his journey. There's an epilogue, but let's look at that next week. Will you bow your heads with me, please, and close your eyes? Here am I, your servant. I am listening. Church, whom I love, my friends and my sisters and my brothers, decrease the background noise and increase the cry of the heart, where you direct your ears and your heart to hear God speak. And when his word is rare, gather in a place where he has said he will be and listen. Speak, for your servant is listening. And God spoke to Samuel amazing things. And Samuel walked a journey of life where God continually spoke to him. What is missing from your life? The voice of God. Speak, for your servant is listening. Father, would you take us on this journey, I pray. Would you wake us up from our stupor, from our trim the lamp like we always have, from our low expectations, and would you invade the space of where we are? Would you stand up close and call our names and speak to us? Through your word, through your spirit, would you speak to us? Would you cause us to stop running to places for false answers and to be like little Samuel and say, here I am, and I will listen. Father, that would be the ultimate gift for each one of us. I pray.